What happens if you're a man with regular levels of testosterone and you give yourself a little boost?
From like an actual testicular health aspect, you're essentially shutting down the signal to them in order to minorly elevate your levels just for some hopeful improvement.
I know like there's some women who get pregnant and then they're just kind of like calm and happy and like just like pregnant.
Yeah.
And I just went like batshit crazy.
If you're not literally dying, good luck getting anything in Canada. Like you better show up to the ER like physically having a heart attack.
Yeah.
Or else you're not getting anything. So
okay, yeah. I can get behind that. Derek, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on my podcast.
You as well. Thanks for having me.
How did you, like, what's your background? For people who aren't aware or familiar with you, can you give a brief background about who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah. So my name is Derek. I started a YouTube channel in 2016, as well as a accompanying website, which I'm probably most well known for. The channel name is More Plates, More Dates. It's kind of centered around men's self-improvement for the most part, but it's kind of just like a catchy name I came up with at the time that I thought was memorable, kind of funny. And since then, it's kind of branched out into multiple different areas, and my interests have evolved since then to be more focused around biology, endocrinology, pharmacology, performance, optimization, longevity, just a bunch of different areas like that. And I guess secondarily, I'm most known for my preventative medicine platform as well as supplement company, but mainly it's the channel which, you know, I produce a bunch of content around, I don't know, just how the human body works, nutrition, optimization, stuff like that. And yeah, it's kind of a high level overview. Hopefully that is a sufficient summation of what I do, I guess.
Yeah, no, that works. Okay, so what do you think the main focus for men should be for overall health, or say the top 3 focuses for men?
High quality sleep for sure. I think a lot of people are burning the candle at both ends and are not really dialing in either their circadian rhythm is out of whack. They are, you know, not getting to bed at an adequate time, and then also not following a regular schedule. And then even when they're doing that, their sleep, even if it's 8 hours, it's oftentimes segmented or not like high quality enough to actually reap the rewards out of it that they could otherwise be getting. And that's massively impactful on many different hormone systems. Most notable, I think that most are aware of, is how detrimental it is to testosterone levels in men. So I would say that's probably like the biggest low hanging fruit, because that's the only like restorative time of the day where your body can actually deal with, you know, cancer cell proliferation, recovery from your workouts. Also mental health massively impacted by quality of sleep for sure. So I would say that's like the biggest thing. And then secondarily to that, as you are well aware, diet quality, hugely impactful for sure. I would say a lot of people are very focused on macronutrients like protein, carbs, fats. They count their calories. That's kind of like the extent a lot of people go to, even those who are trying to be mindful of their health. But a lot of times people overlook micronutrient density of foods as well as mineral intake and things that go, I don't know, like there's a lot of people that will use like low calorie alternatives or sugar-free alternatives, but then they're totally void of any sort of nutritional value whatsoever, other than like, oh, it's high protein and no sugar, so therefore good. Not always the case, because a lot of these vitamins and minerals are like cofactors for different things in your body that are necessary for optimizing performance, vitality, etc. So there's that. And then I guess exercise, third. Like what was the original question was 3 like main thing? Yeah. So that's probably the best I could pull out of my ass off the top of my head.
Sleep. Okay. My sleep has been garbage for about 2 weeks, and I feel like I don't feel good because of it. I don't know. I got into this, like, just into the going to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. It, like, normally my sleep schedule is on point. It's like 10 o'clock early in the morning. And then for a couple of weeks I had, so, you know, I'm on this carnivore diet and I had these amazing sausages made. So I had like meat shipped somewhere, and I had these sausages made, and I guess they went through a meat grinder that had other things in it.
Oh, geez.
And it just screwed up my sleep. And it's amazing how much you need to optimize sleep. What could people do, or what if they have interrupted sleep?
Like, I guess one of the main things is people waking up to go to the washroom in the middle of the night. So that's one of the biggest interrupters for sure that could be mitigated through electrolyte balance. So having a sufficient balance of sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium. A lot of people are not really focusing on mineral intake in their electrolytes, as well as just being very mindful of how much water you're drinking before you go to bed. Like, I'd say that's probably the number one, like, actual physical impediment to staying asleep is people waking up and having to go take a piss, for sure. But other than that, like, actual sleep quality, caffeine timing, definitely huge. A lot of people don't consider the half-life of caffeine is 5+ hours, and depending on how old you are, your metabolism of the caffeine gets worse and worse over time. So eventually it takes longer to work its way out of your system, and that, afternoon coffee that you had on top of your morning coffee could be screwing you up, later into the night when you think, you just assume the caffeine's not in your system because you don't feel, upbeat and energetic anymore. But in reality, the residual effects are still preventing you from getting that really deep sleep. And there's a bunch of other things too, but I mean, those are probably the two main ones off the top of my head, to be honest.
So are you a fan of high salt?
What about high salt?
Well, I mean, just a lot of salt, consuming a lot of salt. You talked about electrolytes. So are you a fan of like extra electrolytes for optimization?
It depends on the individual. Like, I wouldn't just broad spectrum sweepingly say everyone should be adding salt to their diet necessarily, because a lot of people can have, go into elevation of blood pressure when they have added salt to their diet when they don't necessarily utilize it. But yeah, that could be impactful for sure for actually avoiding excessive urination. And I think caffeine also does have a mild diuretic effect. So if you are loading up on caffeine, you can imagine that that's going to make you urinate more as well. So things to be mindful of for sure.
So what's your background in? Like, do you have education wise, do you have education in nutrition or anything like that? Or
that's the interesting thing is, for me, a lot of people think, like, I remember Joe Rogan for a while thought I was a chemist because I had, I don't know, this like rumor started that I was like this meathead chemist. And a lot of people wonder exactly what I do, but I had an undergrad in marketing, and totally useless, by the way. Like, I would not necessarily recommend it for anybody. Yeah. But yeah, my education formally is just on the business administration side of things, but nothing really relevant to what I'm passionate about or pursue nowadays. And mainly my education is self-taught, as well as through collaboration with other individuals that I respect and, find mutual benefit in, educating each other, keeping up to date on the newest literature of endocrinology, whatever it is. And through my preventative medicine platform as well, we have a lot of doctors who I kind of indirectly get to absorb like a sponge a lot of their findings through their work with patients directly, because they talk about stuff in clinical chats all the time. There's meetings all the time. I can kind of indirectly absorb information through them as they work with patients in real time. And then I'm also just like a huge nerd, and I just read studies all the time. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about this platform.
Okay, it's called Marek Health, and essentially it is targeted for broad spectrum optimization. So it's not like a typical, I'm sure you've heard of TRT clinics. TRT is becoming like a very, very popular, almost trendy fad nowadays, where a lot of people are haphazardly jumping on testosterone replacement that may otherwise not even need it. But our platform tries to, I kind of differentiate it in a way that it's focused on optimizing all things from a natural angle too, and then also assessing other kind of diagnostic metrics that could evaluate, things from your lipid health, for cardiovascular disease risk, things like cancer markers. And essentially when you come into our clinic, you'll get teamed up with somebody, a provider, who will kind of evaluate your diagnostics and then make targeted recommendations for optimization from a health perspective, vitality, optimization, perhaps hormones. And it's kind of just like it's like basically ties in exactly with what I'm most passionate about. And I can actually like impart that information to people who follow me.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So my husband watches quite a bit of Mind Pump.
Okay.
And for about 6 months, he was like, my testosterone's low. It's definitely low testosterone. And I need to get on testosterone. And I was like, I don't know. I'm so skeptical. I don't know very much about hormones. I know quite a bit about nutrition, and from having the autoimmune disorder, I know quite a bit about, I know some anyway. You can define quite a bit, but I know some things, but I don't really know anything about hormones. And I was like, I don't know. Injecting testosterone seems like, if you don't need it, first of all, seems like a bad idea. And I know that there are a lot of people on it, and there are a lot of people who say there are benefits to adding in testosterone. What happens if you're a person with, like a man with regular levels of testosterone, and you give yourself a little boost?
Well, it depends. If you give yourself a little boost, as in you push yourself a bit higher than what you are naturally, essentially.
Yeah.
You're essentially shutting down your entire, not your entire reproductive system, but from like an actual testicular health aspect, you're essentially shutting down the signal to them in order to minorly elevate your levels just for some hopeful improvement in cognitive sharpness, muscle building potential, etc. Like oftentimes I think people are misdiagnosed through poor lifestyle and diet habits, and they will haphazardly jump on T because they go into a LabCorp or whatever it is. They get a testosterone test done. They transiently, through one snapshot in time, at one moment, they had a 250 total testosterone level. And then they interpret that as, oh, I must be low T perpetually, and it's negatively impacting my life. I need to get on TRT. But there's all the low-hanging fruit, even that we addressed at the beginning. Those were just a couple of things. Those things are so impactful in testosterone production that if you overlook those and jump right to the drug route, you could be overlooking things that could get you back to a healthy state otherwise, without the necessity to rely on these hormones. So I think some people do need it for sure. And there's like absolute utility in it. And it's very, very effective when it's needed and warranted. But a lot of people, I think, haphazardly get on it and may not otherwise need it. And then they end up reliant on it for their entire lives.
Okay. So what ended up happening with my husband is he was having tree allergies. So he was tired. And that was the end of the story. And now he's not having them. So it was like,
that would have been a brutal reason to get on, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you said reliant. So is there actually no way to get off of it once you're on it?
So if you were a healthy, functioning male with good testosterone levels prior, if you got off within like a reasonable time frame, there's not really a reasonable time frame for replacement because you're supposed to be replacing what you otherwise don't have. So it's like you're essentially, using something, you're artificially shutting down your system that otherwise didn't need to be, and you could get back to your natural function dependent on the duration of exposure. So if you've been doing TRT for like 15 years or something and you technically didn't need it when you started it, are you going to be able to recover to natural function if you then decide, oh, I want to try and come off? It kind of depends, because again, it's almost like there is a use it or lose it kind of thought process that goes into different organs in your body. So if you shut down the signal to your testicles for a decade and a half, and you have like shriveled, atrophied testicles, and then you try to recover to baseline, it's not as simple as just pulling out the testosterone and then everything just works correctly, perfectly. Like you're going to deal with a very, very arduous recovery phase whereby you might end up hating your quality of life so much on that recovery phase that you just end up staying on the testosterone. Now, for some people though, if they were totally healthy, like for example, your husband, if he was to get on test, didn't need it, and then was like, you know what, it's not for me, came off after like 3 months or something, he might have like a transient phase where he kind of feels shitty while it's kind of like leaving his system, and then his normal pituitary is kicking back in. But in that, he'd probably recover to baseline within relatively short order once the drug had worked its way out of his system. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not like massive risk if you're testing it out.
Yeah, no, but I would definitely caution against just testing.
This.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you go from a YouTube channel, like a popular YouTube channel, to running that kind of massive business? Did you have a change? Like, did you have a plan, or is this something that just kind of happened and you went with it?
I much like a lot of businesses that people find themselves in, I very rarely believe that people, especially in the social media space, really predicted where they'd be 5 years ahead of schedule when they first start. So for me, it was I didn't even know if I should be making videos when I started online. Like I literally just started writing articles. Somebody told me, suggested I should also do videos with it, started making them. And as my content evolved and whatnot, you start to look into different ways to monetize, especially things that you're passionate about. Because after a while, when you start making money, you realize the money part can only take you so far. The passion is what's going to actually like drive you for years. So for me, this was like the perfect overlap of monetization and what I actually am highly interested in. And it sort of just evolved naturally. Like I found myself seeing some of these platforms popping up across the USA, and I was just seeing the haphazard cookie cutter protocols that, providers were putting people on just to basically make a markup on medication, essentially. A lot of these companies exist simply to be like almost similar to like the pill mill stuff you heard about back in the day, but like on the testosterone front, a lot of these companies would basically just, evaluate your blood work, but not even really care what it says and be like, here's legal steroids, go, here you go, have fun. And that is not, I thought there was a major hole in the industry for like an actual preventative medicine approach that is looking for optimization from a dietary perspective, sleep hygiene optimization, hormone optimization if warranted, and just like a broad spectrum overview approach. So that's kind of where I came into it.
Yeah, it's cool. Coming from Canada, there aren't as many.
Terrible here.
Are you in Canada?
Yeah, I'm on the West Coast.
Oh.
Yeah.
I left Canada. I'm in Miami now.
Oh, lucky. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to like laugh at you. I didn't know you were from Canada. So is your company based in Canada?
No.
Okay,
it's
you're like,
US
I'm gonna
based.
avoid that. Yeah.
Yeah, Canada is a rough one to try and break into because there's a lot of I don't know who watching has had experiences trying to even get a basic blood test when you're not like 70 years old, but if you're not literally dying, good luck getting fucking anything in Canada. Like you better show up to the ER like physically having a heart attack, or else you're not getting anything. So
okay, I can get behind that. No, it's shocking. It's shocking.
Yeah,
it's free, but then you get what you pay for.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm very, very optimistic about expansion into Canada, because that's something and partly what motivated this whole thing to begin with is I've been so frustrated with the medical system in Canada for a number of years that I was like, why is it that I literally have to drive over the border just to get a blood test? Fucking absurd. So for me, being able to give that access to my parents, to my friends, to myself, that's the kind of stuff that I want people to be able to get a proactive approach to longevity optimization, etc., rather than have to physically like show up having a heart attack to get some help. So
okay. I like that. Yeah, it's crazy moving to the US. It's just there's so many options. It's amazing. Like I found this company online that I'm giving a shot because I'm allergic to everything, which is why I'm on this diet, because I've got food allergies, I have everything, and I found this company that does sublingual immunotherapy. So they'll give you like tiny little doses of like oak and ragweed, cockroach, dust, like everything. And so I'm going to try that out for the next couple of years to see if I can reduce the food allergies and the food sensitivities.
So
I think there might be a cross-reactivity issue with the severe environmental allergens causing the food sensitivities, I'm hoping.
So if you have these sublingual like micro doses
Drops.
of random stuff, like what is that doing? Evaluating if you have a allergic response, and then like...
Well, what you do is you do an allergy test. So they do a prick test,
right.
and then decide, show what you're allergic to, and then they mix that up in this drop, and then you take the drop, and it's supposed to desensitize your system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting. They're doing it for people with peanut allergies. They've been doing this for a little bit because you have a kid with peanut allergies, they can just die, right?
Yeah.
If they don't have the EpiPen. So you can give them tiny bits of peanuts sublingually, and so they have this tiny little immune response, but you can train their immune system over like a 2 or 3 year period. It takes a while. I think they see results after 6 months and slowly reduce sensitivity.
That's crazy.
Cool.
That's like, have you ever heard of those guys who intentionally expose themselves to like snake venom or like some random...
Yeah, it's that.
Okay. Huh. Wild. I didn't know that was like an actual therapy. Crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's called immunotherapy. You can get it in shots too, but there are these companies popping up. I think there are 3 of them now in the US where you can go online and order immunotherapy drops. So if you have tree allergies, you can get this mixture that slowly desensitizes your immune system. And the results are like, it's theoretically, it works. It looks like it works. So fingers crossed. I can one day eat other things than meat. We'll see. Seems unlikely,
Yeah,
but
that
maybe.
would be nice. Yeah.
This episode of the podcast was sponsored by Paleo Valley Beef Sticks. It's a health episode, kind of, so I thought, why not throw these guys in there? Paleo Valley's beef sticks are made from 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef. They're fantastic for snacking if you're trying to lose weight. I give them to Scarlett for a snack in kindergarten, but they're good for you too if you want better food and something to eat that doesn't make you feel like you can't stop eating it and therefore makes you gain weight. Meat doesn't do that. Paleo Valley puts their beef sticks through a natural fermentation process, which is cool, which helps nourish and keep your gut biome healthy. Paleo Valley's beef sticks come in 5 different flavors. Paleo Valley's beef sticks come in 5 different flavors, and all the spices they use in their beef sticks are 100% organic. Other beef sticks often use fillers, like mechanically separated chicken parts, which is just a hilarious thing to add, but you probably shouldn't eat it, that are crushed down, chicken parts that are crushed down into a paste, brominated vegetable oil, BVO, and MSG, which can cause a myriad of issues. Paleo Valley's beef sticks, on the other hand, are clean both for you and for the environment. Great for kids too. All of their cattle are raised on small American-owned farms in the U.S. that use rotational grazing practices to help restore the nutrient content and foliage to grazed pastures. Head over to paleovalley.com to check out their beef sticks today. That's PALEOVALLEY. If you're not entirely sure how to spell Paleo Valley, you should just know how to spell it though. Paleovalley.com for 100% grass-fed beef sticks. Okay, so
Cool.
this company you have that employs doctors, which is very cool. What's your plan with that? Do you have a growth plan, or are you kind of staying where you are?
Yeah, so right now it's more so just brand exposure and bringing more people to spread the message, showing up to different, there's a lot of different kind of like conferences when it comes to like, there's kind of the optimization niche of the scientific community, like a lot of the Ben Greenfields and like of the world, and then there's also like the clinical side with like the Peter Attias and the Hubermans and whatnot, and
Yeah.
I don't know, just like branching as far out as I can and trying to spread knowledge, and also, you know, at the same time, you know, bring people into what I consider to be high quality medical oversight. So, you know, for me, it's more so just continuing to make content surrounding the, I don't know, issues that we face from like a hormone balance perspective, anything health optimization related, and then bringing in like-minded individuals who want to also impart the same message, further educate themselves as well as others in the process. And yeah, you know, I would like to get it international, but it's obviously a very, very large undertaking to when it comes to licensing and all the different, you know, I don't know, like legal loopholes when it comes to medical stuff. So
Yeah.
in the near future, hopefully Canada is on the to-do list. And then,
It's crazy that you can, like, as a Canadian, that it was easier. It's so much easier in America
Yeah.
to do business. It's crazy. Like, I can't get over it, but that's nuts that you'd, I mean, I
Yeah.
suppose most of your audience is probably American versus Canadian, is it?
Yeah. The corporate structure stuff as a Canadian sucks when you're in the States, like trying to establish like the companies that hold the companies that do this. But overall, like everything in the States is just superior overall. And like even before I had all this stuff, like I used to literally pay for blood work, drive over the border to Blaine, Washington, and go to a LabCorp myself, get my blood drawn, get it emailed to me, and then like interpret the results. Like that was how I had to get blood work back in the day, because you would go to a doctor here and just say, "Can I get my cholesterol checked?" And they'd say, "No," and they get mad at you. Because it's like, you're trying to tell me what you need? Go fuck yourself. Get out of my office. Brutal.
That seems pretty accurate.
Yeah.
No, you don't need that. Yeah.
I can imagine what you dealt with growing up with trying to figure out all your stuff, and probably the amount of doctors that shunned you or told you were crazy,
Oh
or
my
or you think you need this test, like I know what's
Yeah,
correct.
no.
I'm the doctor, get out of
I
here.
still have, oh my gosh, I still have anger issues from that. I was like lividly, especially when I ended up putting the autoimmune disorder into remission with diet, then that just like, it blew me away, right? Especially after the medical system experience in Canada. I was livid, livid with anger for probably 2.5 years, because at that point, I'd had my ankle replaced in Canada. They'd installed the replacement slightly crooked.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd solved the autoimmunity and I didn't have that anymore. And I was in chronic pain from a ankle replacement I probably could have avoided.
Yeah.
And I was, anyway, I'm not really angry anymore, but I'm not very trusting of doctors. And I'm sure the Canadian medical system didn't help with that.
At least the silver lining to it, though, is the information you have now that you can then impart on tens of thousands of people. Like even one of my business partners, his wife was on antibiotics during her pregnancy, and then she ended up like wiping out her gut microbiome essentially, and it kind of like presumably impacted their kid in a very significant way. So they have a toddler right now, or an infant, I guess. I don't know when you become a toddler, what the difference is age-wise, but he's like 1, and his gut is just a disaster. Like anything he eats, and his entire like face goes red. Everywhere becomes red, and he tries to like scratch his face off because he's so uncomfortable, and they have to put like mittens on him to make sure he doesn't scratch his face off. And what? Yeah, so like some of the information that Paul Saladino, some of these the autoimmune experienced individuals who have kind of got their stuff into remission via this kind of like wild out there, elimination diet, that information was not available, 10 plus years ago. So you had a lot of like babies being put on corticosteroids long term, which is going to like significantly hinder their growth, and impact them in so many bad ways. So like even now that they're trying to see if they can do some sort of elimination style diet while they rebuild his gut microbiome and then kind of reintroduce more diversity as he gets older, kind of thing.
Yeah, they should do it. I was really paranoid. So my daughter's 5, and I was really paranoid about her like microbiome, just everything, allergies, like everything to do with her, because I was sick from such a young age, and then I was on antibiotics so often. I was like, my microbiome's probably messed up, which means she's going to be messed up, and like, what can I do about that? And so I didn't start, I did meat only when we were first introducing foods, and then introduced like one food at a time and waited. And that worked really well. And she does have, she has environmental allergies, and she's got a host of sensitivities, but we were able to avoid them because we just did one food at a time.
Now, do you know if it's obviously, I'm sure you've researched this heavily, but how much of it is genetic versus epigenetic? Like I know, and maybe, I don't know if this is even a question you can answer, but I know, for example, if somebody is obese, like self-inflictedly obese when they are pregnant and have a kid, they could pass on some of that to their child and put them in a worse kind of baseline position. And then they have to deal with those issues too. Does that have any sort of crossover from, I think you mentioned both of your parents had autoimmune issues to some extent? Yeah,
my mom actually recently got diagnosed with lupus, which she's not on medication for it. She's on the same diet as me. Okay. But that explains arthritis and some organ issues and some eye issues. So lupus. And my dad had psoriasis and alopecia at one point, gum disease, just not great from both. I have a brother, he's totally fine. I have no idea how that happened.
Estrogen is very impactful on autoimmune issues. So typically you'll find that, for example, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an autoimmune issue that attacks the thyroid. And in general, it's very, very majorly affecting women relative to men. And it's because of estrogen's impact on the immune system, seemingly. So women are...
I wonder... That's really interesting. Okay, I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, though. A lot of the people I've spoken with who've had autoimmunity and are on the Lion diet or the Carnivore diet have gotten significantly worse or got worse, whatever their problem was, after having children. And for me, I actually put myself into remission on a very restrictive paleo diet. So it was super clean. I was eating 25 foods, which I thought was restrictive. But I didn't have any symptoms. And then I had scarlet, and that's when I went over to the meat-only diet because my autoimmune flared up. Do you know anything about pregnancy exacerbating autoimmunity?
I would imagine the massive fluctuation in hormones from a progesterone, estrogen aspect throughout that process would have very significant implications on that. How they would go to, like, as far as the metrics of hormones before pregnancy, during, and then after, and reaching baseline, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head exactly what in general they do, but I would imagine, and this is kind of where the utility of having baseline blood work comes in, and why I recommend anybody get like an extensive panel, regardless if they're going to go on TRT or not, like anything. Because if something goes awry, being able to look back and see what was my baseline when I was healthy and what is weird and aberrant now can be very, very helpful for actually like owning in and figuring out what might be screwing you up. So from like a hormone metabolism aspect and just balance of everything, like I would imagine there could be something there for sure. Like I know postpartum depression is, I believe, lack of progestogenic activity from the changes in progesterone activity in the body. So having that crash or be non-existent or, you know, decrease, whatever it may be, could be something that leads to like anxiety, depression, mood swings, just like a lot of major issues. And they've actually developed drugs around trying to like replicate the same things that you could get from like adequate amounts of natural hormone production from progesterone, for example. So yeah, there's definitely, I would imagine, something very impacted by the hormone balance side of things after, for sure. And that's where, you know, a good elaborate blood test, I think, would be highly warranted compared to a baseline beforehand.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Regarding progesterone, from what you know about the topic, is that not enough progesterone to begin with, or are those like downstream problems, like it's not getting converted properly or something?
I believe it's not enough in general. Typically, people who have conversion issues are people who are using drugs that impact enzymatic pathways. Like, for example, guys who use finasteride for preventing hair loss. There's an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase, and if you inhibit that enzyme, despite the fact that you're preventing the hormone DHT from wreaking havoc on your head, you're also preventing the conversion of different progestogenic metabolites. Like allopregnanolone is a very, very honed in on one that has like anxiolytic activity and is very, very significantly implicated in like depression outcomes and whatnot. And if you don't have either a sufficient amount of the substrate to produce those metabolites, so progesterone being the main thing off the top of my head that I could think of that's impactful on that, or if you're using a drug as a male to inhibit that enzyme, then downstream, yeah, it could be problematic. But from the female side of things, I would imagine progesterone, lack thereof, is probably the main needle mover in that side.
Interesting. I had a pretty miserable pregnancy experience, and I know like there's some women who get pregnant and then they're like, they still have pregnancy hormones, but they're kind of like calm and happy and like just like pregnant. And yeah. I just went like batshit crazy. And yeah. I could feel hormones. And I was like, that doesn't feel like me. And it was bad. And it felt like something was wrong. And I had this, and I know some people have miserable pregnancies, but it felt like I went crazy in a way that something was like off.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if I spent the years like age 12 to 23 on antidepressants, which can really increase your progesterone levels. And I was wondering if being on that for like a decade during my developmental years screwed up my brain enough that just some of the pregnancy hormones just don't make me feel good. I can hardly take any medication now without it making me feel like terrible in a side effect way that normal people shouldn't really have. Like antihistamines, anything kind of make me crazy.
Yeah, the
SSRI
side of things, like as far as female endocrinology, it's definitely not my like wheelhouse. And again, I'm not like a clinical specialist or anything. I'm just a guy on YouTube ultimately at the end of the day. So don't take this as medical advice, anybody watching. This is why you would get a high quality medical provider. But from what I have seen, I think SSRIs, like even from a quick Google search, they seem to impact allopregnanolone solely and do not substantially affect the brain concentrations of progesterone or dihydroprogesterone. So, it's tough to say too, because some people, the way they partition certain hormones, like down certain pathways to different metabolites, it's different proportionally, and different tissues have different receptor expression from that amount of hormone. Like even from the testosterone side of things, some people are going to get more of an effect, even though they have less testosterone on a blood test than another guy, because of the way the receptors interact with the hormone. So it's tough to say. You can't really predict broad spectrum just because you have a heightened level on a blood test or a heightened level based on what it's supposed to do, that's going to yield the exact effect you're looking for, especially when it might have like backhanded consequences on upstream things that are going on. So, like extra, selective serotonin reuptake inhibition, I can't say for certain what it did that, might have impacted you.
Nobody knows either.
Yeah.
Like nobody knows. I talked to some Eastern European doctors, and they said they have brain scans that say that they change, that you could see it on brain scans, like decades of SSRI use. And I was like, wow, that's definitely not something that we have here. At least they don't say that.
Yeah, I think there was some study that came out recently that said SSRIs are I don't know, they used to be thought to be, lack of serotonin was thought to be the cause of depression, and then recently they were like, no, that's actually not the case.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
They're like, there's no evidence that serotonin plays that type of role, or lack of serotonin plays a role in depression. It's like, all these people on serotonin increasing drugs.
But sometimes it's hard to tell too, when it's like, because again, when you circle back to the low hanging fruit discussion, it's like, how many people on this earth are getting 6 hours of sleep perpetually, have to get up underslept, drive to a job they hate? And there's so many different factors from a lifestyle perspective that are so deleterious to all of the hormone systems. And then they'll blame, they'll rely on a drug or this or that. And then they're wondering why they're feeling a certain way. It's got to be because of the drug or not because of the drug, when in reality, it's like the baseline infrastructure that holds up the tower, so to speak, is just not even set properly to begin with. So it's kind of hard to say for certain, owning in on one specific thing. Oh, it was definitely this, when we have no idea about all the other, weren't you on Adderall at the time too, when you were trying?
Yeah. I was on tons of things.
So I imagine that fucked your sleep up brutally at the same time. So we have no idea for sure, but I would imagine that has it's like a vicious circle effect. Sometimes you'll take a drug to correct an issue that was caused by some lack of foundational principles from a lifestyle perspective. And then using that might fix something acutely, but on the backhand fucks up the baseline stuff. And then it's
I had things perfected. I did. I mean, the Adderall really helped, but I was on 7 medications, immunosuppressants that I injected, and antibiotics.
In Canada,
just because
they only prescribe extended release Adderall, as far as I know, too. So it's if you look at the half-life of extended release Adderall and trying to get a high quality sleep when you're on a very, very long extended window literal amphetamine just to function, and then you might be having caffeine on top of that because people how many coffees they have a day or whatever, trying to get high quality sleep with that in your system, it's essentially impossible, I would say. So
it was crazy. I used to take, do you know Gravel?
Yep.
Do you know so I took Gravel to sleep at night, which is for people listening, is like Benadryl. So I take Adderall in the morning, and then I take a couple of Gravel at night, and then just repeat. But I did figure out the perfect combination of medications to keep me functioning enough that I figured out how to get off of everything and fix it with diet. So I can't say it was all detrimental, because it did put me in a position where I could at least function enough that I thought, okay, how do I get out of this as soon as possible?
No, but again, I think it circles back to it was shitty that you had to go through it, but it makes you more, I don't know, in a better position to impart that wisdom on people who might be on the laundry list of the entire catalog of drugs right now, and maybe don't need it or whatever.
I wouldn't trade it. During the experiences, I think I remember even praying, how do I make this stop? But now that it's over, it's if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be able to tell people about it. And lots of people have reached out, and it's helped them, and I'm fine now. Plus, I don't think I would be as Like I'm a fairly disagreeable person, and I don't know what I would be like if I hadn't had chronic health issues, but I think it probably made me a more compassionate person, especially towards sick people. Like I'm not very patient, I don't think, and I have a lot of compassion for people who are sick, and I don't know if I would have that otherwise. So I'm definitely grateful for that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are quick to judge somebody who's overweight or somebody who has an issue, but they have no idea what might be underlying and leading to that problem to begin with. Like maybe they're dealing with some like very significant, obscure as hell issue that then leads to all of these like byproduct, manifestations of like a not as great cosmetic appearance or whatever it is. And to be judgmental on that is like very common and unfortunate. So it's good that you went through that for sure. Overall, I think.
How do you feel then about the fat acceptance movement?
I think it's not good because being obese is unhealthy. So I think that shaming somebody who's fat is not good, but I think it is not something that should be celebrated, which is the main issue that I see in social media is a lot of these companies. It's kind of like hard to you can't really blame them because at the same time, so many people are obese that obviously if you're going to make clothing, for example, you're going to make them for obese people too, so they can fit it because that's a giant demographic of your, customer base. So are you going to put, not feature them in advertisements? Like at some point you're going to have to market to those people because they exist and they have to buy clothes just like every other person.
Yeah.
But then if you put out an ad with an obese person who's like in fitness apparel, you get shit on as a company for trying to like promote fat acceptance. And it's like, it's a weird like double-edged sword because I think on one hand, the companies are very aware of this too. And then it gets like media hype and attention and clicks. But on the other hand, it's like these people need to wear clothes. So it's like, I think in general, the kind of the celebration of obesity, which is something that happens in social media and TikTok culture and stuff, is toxic because it definitely does reinforce bad behavior that ultimately I think it's not even a debate that it's not healthy to be holding excessive amounts of body fat. But at the same time, it's kind of like, that double-edged sword, like I said, because some people do have issues that lead to these, problems that may be less controllable than the next guy who just has like a lack of willpower, or because some people just are lazy and fucking suck at following a diet. Like that's just how they are. And then there are some people who legitimately have epigenetics passed on from their fat as hell parents that led to like poor satiety, appetite signaling feedback systems and whatnot, and they're perpetually dealing with heightened levels of hunger compared to the next guy who just feels satisfied off of 1,000 calories less per day. And then is that person just like, a worse off a person who just has low willpower, or is it that their literal brain chemistry is wired differently than this person? It's definitely a very interesting discussion, but I think more compassion needs to be taken to it from both sides of the spectrum.
I like that. I agree too. I think that encouraging it and saying that it doesn't cause health problems is an issue. But there just needs to be more education about how to get out of that. Like but it's also tricky dealing with people who are in a kind of a health crisis. I can remember I never had someone come up to me and go, oh, maybe you should try an elimination diet because maybe your body's inflamed. Maybe you're having allergic reactions. Like I never had that conversation.
Yeah.
But whenever anybody did mention any type of kind of alternative approach to health, I can remember being angry at them, like in an inappropriate way. It was like, how dare you tell me that my problems are solved that easily? And I had like severe problems. But it's hard to speak to sick people who've been trying things for a very long time and then saying, oh, well, maybe you just didn't try this properly.
Yeah, like telling a person who's fat, it's just like, you idiot, just eat less. Like sometimes it's not that, like even though that is ultimately will make you lose weight, like there are other complications that can lead to, maybe if you dealt with the same hormone signaling as that person, maybe you'd be fat too. Like you don't know for sure, So because some people literally will have like, for example, if they had an autoimmune issue that was attacking their thyroid, and then they have a lack of thyroid hormone output that regulates their metabolism, and then no matter what they eat, their actual metabolism is at a lowered set point than the next person. They can't necessarily control that inherently just through lifestyle changes or like how much exercise they're doing necessarily. And they might just have less T3 than the next guy, or crash T3 because their thyroid has been destroyed by this autoimmune issue for years. Telling that person just like eat less and exercise. It's not as simple as that. Or a guy with crash testosterone being like, just get in the gym, lift some weights, bro. Like, it's a bit different when you literally have no motivation, no drive, crash testosterone, your libido's non-existent, sleep quality is terrible. It's definitely a nuanced discussion.
Interesting. Okay. I definitely had that. Maybe I should go through some of your blood tests. I kind of like, all my symptoms went away with the diet, and then I was kind of like, goodbye medical system. I've seen you enough. Yeah. Although now I'm trying this sublingual immunotherapy for environmental allergies. So we'll see what that does. But I definitely have the like can't stop eating. I don't have that on the carnivore diet, but I had that, and I have like excellent self-control. Like I'm on this diet now. I'm like hyper conscientious. I think I have good self-control, but I really had difficult time stopping eating whenever I was eating anything. And even now, if I introduce something that has a different ingredient, then I'm just like switch into, I'll just eat the entire thing. Yeah. So I was never one of those people that could like have a little bit of like a cake or a cookie or something. It was always like, now that's all I want and I'm starving.
Yeah. Some of those foods I think are just like, they're not even food at the end of the day. So trying to judge your, ability to regulate portion control when you're eating something that is like hyper palatable and isn't even an actual food item is not, I don't think is representative necessarily of, willpower or self-control. But
so you don't think anyone, like, is there one person that can eat one cookie and be like, I'm full?
Oh yeah. I definitely know people who do that. And I look at them, I'm like, that's fucking wild. Is there
something wrong with them?
Yeah.
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 What?
Some people are fine with that.
I swear my brother is like that. Just have a little bit of a cupcake. It's like, what? It's like cocaine.
Yeah. I can't even keep it in the house. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes me feel better. So these blood tests you're talking about, what type of markers should everyone just go get tested so that at least they have a baseline?
So we have pre-designed panels on the site for both men and women and depending on budget, it gets more comprehensive the deeper you go. And some of them are like more elaborate to then be insightful for if you were going to pursue something like hormone replacement, if you're postmenopausal or if you're a man with low T, whatever it is. There's more comprehensive metrics that are, more expensive and elucidate more stuff. But in general, from like a baseline perspective, I think cardiovascular disease is still one of the number one killers. So getting a high quality lipid panel that assesses your a kind of potential for atherosclerosis, I think is definitely warranted, at least to see what your current diet model and lifestyle is yielding as far as, atherogenic particles and whatnot. I think getting like a basic complete blood count is definitely reasonable. Thyroid markers, probably a good thing to check as well. Basic kidney health, liver function, it's called like a metabolic panel. It's kind of like the standard summation. I don't know. It's like a subcategory of pretty much every panel we have, I think. So I've definitely checked that. I guess in general, from a hormone perspective, above and beyond the thyroid, getting it's called gonadotropins. It's like your LH and FSH, your luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone. If you are a man, especially, definitely worthwhile to see how much signaling you have to your testes to actually produce testosterone. Because some people, cool. So getting not just your total T and figuring out how much testosterone do I have, but also upstream to that, why do I have low T? Or why is my T where it is? Seeing how much of a signal you have from your brain down to your testicles is worthwhile, because then you can kind of evaluate, is it my testicles are non-responsive to the signal, or is it that I have a lack of signal? And then why is that the way it is? And kind of getting a more comprehensive outlook as to why you are functioning the way you are, and if it's a lack of sleep or micronutrient intake or whatever it is. Because some people who are low T, your diagnosis and what you get treated with will differ, or lack thereof will differ very, very significantly based on, do you have enough signal going to your testes but they're just not responding to it? Because at that point, that's where something like a intervention with therapy becomes more warranted, because it's like you literally have testicular failure. Whereas for another guy, who's low T because of lifestyle and his sleep sucks, his diet sucks, whatever, he might have low T, but it's like his LH and FSH are super low too because he just is everything from the baseline foundation is terrible. So that sort of thing is insightful to see, are you haphazardly getting on testosterone therapy and you don't need it? And if so, what could you do to then optimize like the whole reproductive axis kind of thing? So getting your LH and FSH checked, I think it's definitely worthwhile. Total testosterone, but above and beyond that, your free testosterone. This is like the hormone that is not like, it's called free because it's not bound to these like binding proteins in your blood that kind of like bring it around to target tissues. And free is kind of the number that dictates how much is actually freely available to do stuff in actual tissues in the body. So getting a total and a free is definitely worthwhile. And all of these, it sounds really complicated. It's like, how would, people are probably thinking, do I need to write notes or whatever? Like any good panel will have all of these things in it as is. As well, getting a fasting insulin, hugely overlooked. A lot of people are just checking fasting glucose, but fasting insulin is going to be very worthwhile to see how insulin sensitive you are. And this is one of the biggest tie-ins to like checking pre-diabetes risk as well as, cancer cell development potentially. I think getting a fasting insulin is definitely very worthwhile. Vitamin D, a lot of people are very deficient in vitamin D. I definitely think that's worth checking. C-reactive protein, that's an inflammation marker that I think is worth checking as well. And there's a bunch of stuff, like I could go on all day, but those are kind of like the low-hanging fruit, I would say, off the top of my head. Yeah, I think that's a lipoprotein little a could be part of a good lipid panel as well. But other than that, it sounds like a lot of stuff, and it's very, very complicated to wrap your head around. It's like, holy shit, I don't even want to get this done because it sounds so complicated. But that's where having, just a panel that's made for you, everything's done, and then somebody interprets it for you who's qualified is definitely worth the money, in my opinion.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do another one of those. I'm going to be coming up on 5 years on this diet. 5 years in December. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I'll probably maybe I'll do a bunch of blood work to prove I'm not dying, see what's going on.
What inspired you to do it? Was it Sean Baker or before that, or how did you arrive at it?
Initially I went down I was in biomedical science and I was doing all these tests, like blood tests, just everything to try and figure out what was wrong with me. I did my family tree. I got everyone to do genetics tests to see if there was some weird gene thing that was going on. And I got to the paleo diet just to rule diet out, because I didn't think it was playing a role. And I wasn't eating that unhealthy. I was eating a lot of chicken and broccoli and rice. So I'd gotten to that point, and then I was like, well, maybe I'll get rid of everything I could possibly be allergic to just to see. So eggs and shellfish and soy and nuts and grains. And I really cut down as much as I thought was healthy. And that basically put me into remission in a month. That was a paleo diet. It was crazy. I was eating mostly sweet potatoes and carrots and meat, but I was still eating some fruit. It wasn't crazy restrictive. And then everything was pretty good. I got off all my medication and I got a lot more sensitive to foods when I stopped taking the SSRIs. Stopping the SSRIs just destroyed me. And I didn't know what was happening at the time because I didn't know that they could cause physical dependence. So I stopped taking Adderall and I was maybe I'll be tired. And I stopped taking some of these medications, but I stopped taking SSRIs and was just I should feel better. And I didn't. I felt much worse. My food sensitivities went up. But I had them kind of under control with paleo, and I got pregnant. And then my autoimmune symptoms came back. And I was on this restrictive diet that had worked before, and it didn't work anymore. And I was desperate because my depression came back, my arthritis came back. I was itchy everywhere, and I was did I get better in the first place? Has it always been like this? And then I figured if I'm itchy everywhere, it's probably not in my head. And so I got desperate and I started cutting out foods again, and I went down to meat and greens. So I was literally eating lettuce and meat. And I was maybe I can drop the lettuce, but I hadn't heard of the carnivore diet. I was I just need to have a baseline to not react, and I can reintroduce foods. And I didn't, but I was breastfeeding at that time, and I didn't want to screw myself up because of Scarlet. And then I sent somebody a picture of my lunch. I was just eating chicken wings. I was like, I'm doing this like again. And somebody sent me the video of Sean Baker on Joe Rogan. And they're like, yeah, this guy only eats steak. And I was like, okay, I will literally do that right. Like, I didn't even know that was an option. And I was getting some pressure from in-laws about my diet. And the baby. And so I was like worried about being selfish, I guess. And going on this crazy diet. But then when I saw Sean Baker and that he'd been on it for years and he was just so chill, it's like, yeah, it's fine. Just eat steak. I was like, okay. So that's what brought me to it. And then I just haven't been able to reintroduce anything without having like what appears to be allergic reactions, which got me to come to the conclusion that maybe I'm having cross-reactivity issues. Like sometimes if you're super allergic to trees, you can have oral allergy syndrome to like apples and stoned fruit, pitted fruit, fruit with stones. Anyway, and I have that, and I was like, maybe it's a cross-reactivity problem, and that's why I'm hypersensitive to food proteins. So,
what do you think of all these like sub niches that are stemming out of the carnivore diet, where you have like the organ meat plus red meat and fruit camp, and then like red meat only versus? I saw a pretty critical comment of yours on a Saladino podcast recently, and
okay. So I have an issue. I think I have a more like personal issue with some of the things Saladino says, because I get the people who come to me to the Lion diet, which is literally just like ruminant animal meat. They're people who've tried everything else, and when they start trying the diet, they get confused. So they instead of just eat ruminant meat. Try to make sure your electrolytes don't go crazy, and then wait until, see how you're feeling, like give it 3 months and then start to reintroduce food. It's pretty simple for someone who's really sick and confused and desperate to just do this and then wait, like calm down, just make it through this and wait. And then you get people who are like, oh no, you gotta do the supplements. You gotta do the liver supplements. Liver supplements, or you're going to be like liver deficient. You got to do the liver supplements. And then it's like, well, no, you should have juice in the mornings because you need some extra glucose. Make sure you have like 3 tablespoons of honey before you go to bed. And it's just like, I know for me, I'm still, whatever's wrong with me, I'm still too sensitive to introduce any fruit. So people being like, oh, well, no, people always ate fruit. You can eat oranges. Oranges give me terrible arthritis. So then you have people who are trying the diet for autoimmunity who are like, why isn't it working? And it's because they're still eating a ton of fruit or something. And I was hoping the point of the diet is like eliminate everything and then reintroduce. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to figure out what's wrong with you, especially if you have an autoimmune disorder. And then the supplements, like I'm a fan of electrolytes. I wish I had increased my salt and potassium in particular intake in the first 8 months of carnivore, because I had like muscle cramps and I just dealt with them, which was unpleasant. But I don't eat organs. I've been doing this for 5 years. I don't like liver. The liver is disgusting. And if you like gag when you eat it, and then they tell you you'll take it in a pill, it's like, maybe you don't need to eat it if it makes you gag. So no, I'm not a fan.
Okay. No, it was interesting because one of the first like podcasts I saw about this stuff was like, I saw your podcast with Rogan, your dad's with Rogan, Saladino with Rogan, and then there was expected crossover with you and Saladino, and then kind of all of these different like sub niches started to like expand into different verticals of like, this is the way to do it. No, this is the way to do it. And it definitely adds layers of complexity to it that can be overwhelming, I think, for some people, where it's like, oh, I can't even start if I don't have a testicle, or like, or if
my gosh,
if I don't have like heart with me or whatever.
I don't like that either. It's like, gotta carry around a spleen in my backpack when I travel. It's like as if being on the diet doesn't make you freaky enough. You need to carry around organs. I think like my goal with the Lion diet anyway is to give people a place to go if they need to figure out their issues, and then hopefully they can just reintroduce foods and hopefully they don't have to be stuck on the diet. Like I have a feeling that I'm not going to be stuck on it forever. I think I can figure out how to reduce sensitivities, but at least it's a starting point and then you can reintroduce. So if you end up eating meat, fruit, maybe greens, like whatever else, and that's what makes you feel good, that's fantastic. that's like where I was at before I had a baby. So like I don't have anything. And I think that diet's way healthier than like standard American diet. So I still like what Saladino's doing because he's saying, here's a healthy diet. And like, yeah, that's a healthy diet. But for people with autoimmunity or like severe, like multiple sclerosis, like something crazily bad, then it's frustrating to be like, this is what's going to help you. Because then they can sometimes give up. Well, it didn't work, so the carnivore diet's out.
Yeah, when you see like Liver King stories, for example, it's like overwhelming to even think about how would I even prepare or source any of this shit? Because it's like
Testicle?
you'll have like bone marrow like in like a bowl beside him. There's this other weird concoction, and then a bowl of testicles and this and that. And it's just like the process of even finding even like high quality red meat, like ground bison or whatever, in Canada is terrible. It's actually pretty hard to find. But then finding organs on top of that and whatnot can be could definitely tip somebody over the edge where it's like, oh, like, fuck it. It's too complicated for me to even figure out how to find this stuff, let alone start.
Yeah, especially somebody who's like barely making it out of bed or like with an autoimmune disorder. They're like, okay, now I have to drop all the foods I like and go into like food withdrawal and probably feel worse initially and also figure out how to eat organs.
Yeah.
Ew.
One thing I would say, just because it popped in my head too, is a lot of people who are dealing with this kind of stuff definitely look at what you're taking as well, not just from a food intake aspect, but also like birth control. And,
oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, like how impactful these things are on all bodily functions, including autoimmunity for sure. When you're using like a synthetic ethinyl estradiol with a synthetic progestin to like manually castrate yourself, it's going to be impactful on your food sensitivity probably. So a lot of women who are using an array of different things probably are going to be looking at, like, it's very hyper specific focused, a lot of these discussions on what are you eating that's causing an immune flare. And then they'll forget the baseline foundation of all these medications they're on that are screwing with them too. So it's not just the lifestyle from your sleep, your diet, whatever, your exercise. It's also what's all the other stuff you're taking that could be impacting it too. So definitely worth looking at that, because I think a lot of people, they'll literally go years not even thinking about the medications they're taking and how those might be impacting everything else. And they look at, the stuff that they think it must be. Like if you even come to the conclusion that it's your food you're eating, like you're already pretty deep down the rabbit hole. But then I think oftentimes it gets like hyper focused on, and then they forget about some of this other stuff too. So I think it's definitely worth mentioning.
That's actually so true. I probably haven't spoken about that enough. When I like for my blog and everything, I say, okay, you like eventually you have to get off of everything because, and like I told you earlier, I can't take anything. I can't take zinc without it stopping me from sleeping. Like I really can't take anything. But I was on so many medications, and then diet helped me so much that it didn't occur to me as much. My dad, though, he got rid of a whole bunch of health problems from going on the diet, and then getting off of antidepressants literally almost killed him. And then he was put on a number of medications, and it was just like, diet's not working. What's going on? Like he has symptoms, diet's not working. And it took us quite a long time, I think because he took SSRIs for a long time and I was on them. It took both of us a really long time to be like, this is the medication that's causing these problems? That's crazy. And then a lot of doctors too, they're like, oh, you can experience some side effects, but it's not like this side effect could ruin your life because it's just this tiny little pill, right?
Yeah, like especially in young girls, I think it's the worst because they're typically the first ones to get on essentially lifelong HRT through a birth control pill or something similar to that. And they end up at like 15, 16 years old prescribed what is literally going to be their androgen and estrogen they rely on for libido, this and that, which is going to be suboptimal. But in addition to that, like that becomes such a consistent part of your life, you even forget it's a part of the equation. A massively impactful one too. Like the impact on testosterone, free testosterone levels and suppression of it from birth control is like astounding. When you actually look at how much you are fucking up your hormones as a girl who's on birth control, it's like your free testosterone levels could drop by like 80-90% while you're using it.
Wow.
Yeah. So like a lot of girls, like I'm sure you've seen the literature on like impact on sexual like preference
Selection.
for like type of, masculine versus less masculine men or whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is definitely impacted heavily, I think, from how much, like a lot of girls think they're just asexual and have no sex drive, but in reality, they're like manually shutting down their testosterone levels.
Didn't even consider that link to, okay, I've thought about the link to, even politically, the link to that and birth control, like, and the insanity that's kind of going on right now. It's like you wouldn't want, do you know what percentage of the population is on birth control? I looked this up the other day. I think it was 60% of women who can get pregnant are actively taking birth control and 80% have taken it. That could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
It's high, whatever it is.
Yeah, which would impact mate selection. Like everybody's mate selection is impacted in a more feminine man, right?
Yeah.
That's the choice. That's crazy.
There's some data that suggests it may not be as significant as you think in terms of mate selection, but I definitely think
it doesn't look that way.
It definitely, there's something to be said though, like regardless if your hormones are plummeted, it has an effect physiologically. Like at best case scenario, you're just like not impacted. But worst case scenario, and oftentimes, like I'm pretty sure everyone knows a girl who either had a side effect of some sort from the birth control, or they're just operating with a state of lowered sexual desire or lack thereof entirely. And they don't attribute it to the birth control. They just think that's their baseline state because since they've been sexually active, they've been on the drug. So they just assume their entirety of their lives, essentially, I just don't want sex that much, or I just am not that interested in, I could go, they just overlook it entirely. And it's a very, very problematic thing how, again, like how haphazardly men are put on testosterone pales in comparison to how haphazardly women are put on a synthetic drug that's not even bioidentical. It's a synthetic progestin. Your body doesn't produce this progestin. Like this is technically actually an anabolic, or it's not an anabolic, but it's a steroid. It's derived from, there's an anabolic steroid called nandrolone that men in bodybuilding use. They chemically tweak that drug because it's so suppressive and castrating at low dosages, and created orally bioavailable analogs of it that are used in women for castration, birth control, like levonorgestrel, and a bunch of other synthetic 19-nor derivatives. And then they use a synthetic estrogen on top of that too, ethinyl estradiol, and you're just operating off of like this, you're just like a pseudo-castrated human essentially for years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, I haven't heard it that put that way. That's horrible.
Yeah.
That's horrible. I was put on birth control because I had like bad skin as a teenager, and it was like, this will fix your skin. And then you're also on birth control, yay. And that was like 14. And my mom told me, I remember, she goes, she didn't like hammer it in like she should have. She goes, oh yeah, when I was on birth control, it made me depressed. And I was just like, well, I was on SSRIs already. I was like, I'm already depressed. Like, just like what, who cares? Which is a teenage response. And I think what it did, though, it's hard to say because I was on so many like mind-altering drugs, Adderall, SSRIs, birth control, like so many things that it's hard to say what that did specifically. But I know one thing it did is it blocked me out from any emotional difference during my cycle, right? So when I stopped taking it, I was like, oh, I can actually tell when I'm ovulating. Like I can actually feel that. I feel different. I act in a slightly different way and I can feel it. And I was like, that's actually very cool. Like that's a very cool thing to experience after it just being like, okay, you get your period once a month and that's kind of it. Or you don't get your period, right? Because there's birth control for that too, every 3 months. But that was really interesting, and no one had ever, I hadn't had a conversation anyway with anyone that was like, you should be able to experience these like waves in hormones, and yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah,
the medical system's messed up.
Similar to the discussion of if you're a guy who takes TRT and you don't need it, how problematic is the recovery process going to be to get back to like a natural function? On the flip side, no one talks about women who are on, because a lot of women skip the placebo pills too, or they're not placebo, the sugar pills in their packs, and they just stay on like the straight hormones the entire time to skip, bleeding because they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So that if you're on it for years on end, shutting yourself down, trying to get back to natural function is not totally different than a guy who's been on steroids for years and then is trying to recover function too, because you're both in a state of like pseudo castration, and then you're trying to get back to baseline after years of exposure. Your kind of reproductive system has not been functional for a decade plus in some cases. Expecting you to recover in short order and that it's going to be a smooth transition is often not going to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, okay. I may be hitting you up for blood tests.
Okay.
For my 5 years on Carnivore. We'll see.
Sure.
We'll see. If people want to find you online and they don't follow you already, where should they go?
I think the best place is probably YouTube, More Plates, More Dates, or Instagram, any of the main social platforms I'm on. And then if they want to check out Marek Health for some of the hormone stuff we discussed, MAREK health.com. And you can just go to just to get started, if you want a blood test. You don't have to have a doctor look at it too. You can just look at it yourself and make your own informed decision. If you want to move forward with medical oversight or not, you can just go to the lab test section. There's pre-designed panels for men as well as for women, and they've been audited by me as well as numerous other medical providers on our team. And it's kind of just like turnkey, done for you. And hopefully it's going to be impactful on people's quality of life is what I'm hopeful for. So
yeah, that's good. People can just purchase the test and then bring it to LabCorp or wherever they want to go.
Yeah. So you would purchase it online, then you would get a requisition form. You could walk into a LabCorp wherever you live in the States and then get it done. And then from there, you could either have a provider or patient care coordinator go over the test results with you. And then if warranted, proceed with some sort of targeted recommendations thereafter. But there's no stipulation where you have to do all of it. You could just get a blood test and see where you're at and kind of just have that baseline panel for reference in the future if something goes awry. Definitely something I would recommend for majority of people.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.